The alarms on the Aegis blared like a warning scream, filling the ship with red flashes and the scent of burnt circuits, and Mira Kane, a young human cadet, felt her heart pound in her chest as the floor beneath her shook from the impact of alien fire. The bridge was chaos incarnate, crew members running, consoles sparking, and the massive screens flickering with warnings of breaches and hull damage. Towering above them all, Commander Vroth, a four-eyed alien with scales that shone like molten metal, barked orders with a voice that shook the very air, and his officers, cruel and mocking, laughed at the human crew, pointing directly at Mira and calling her inexperienced, fragile and useless, as if she could do nothing to change the fate of the ship. She could feel their eyes on her, the weight of their doubt pressing down like a physical force, but beneath it, a spark of determination ignited, a refusal to let the mockery define her. The enemy, the Zorvax, were a merciless species, their fleets surrounding the Aegis in perfect formation, plasma blasts slicing through space and colliding with shields in violent eruptions of light and sound, each hit rattling the ship and sending tremors through the metal floor. Mira ran toward the cannon control console, her hands trembling but her mind sharp, knowing this weapon was humanity's only hope and that it was untested, dangerous, and complicated. Yet it was the only thing standing between them and total annihilation. She glanced back briefly to see the captain, tense and sweating, giving her a look that held hope and fear in equal measure, and she knew she had to act fast because hesitation would mean death. She took a deep breath, feeling the hum of the cannon's energy core beneath her fingertips, a vibration that seemed alive, waiting for the command to unleash its power, and she thought of everything she had learned in training. Every late night spent memorizing schematics. Every drill, every simulation, all of it leading to this moment. The alien officers continued to mock her, their voices sharp and cruel, underestimating the human spirit entirely, convinced that a cadet could not wield the power of the cannon. But Mira ignored them, focusing on the calculations, the charge, the angle, the timing, because she knew that fear and doubt were luxuries they could not afford and that every second wasted would cost lives. Sparks flew from damaged consoles around her as she adjusted the targeting sequence, sweat running down her face, muscles tense, her heart pounding in rhythm with the warnings blaring across the deck, and she felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and resolve, realizing that this was more than just a test of skill. It was a test of will, courage, and humanity itself. Outside the viewports, the stars were littered with streaks of energy as enemy ships advanced, and she could see the plasma trails of shots narrowly missing the Aegis, ripping apart smaller vessels and sending debris tumbling through space, a violent dance of destruction that made the stakes painfully clear. Mira's mind raced, remembering the words of her instructors who had always doubted her, always whispered that humans were weak and fragile, always said she was too young, too inexperienced, too small to make a difference in this vast universe, and yet here she was, the only one capable of wielding the weapon that could turn the tide of this battle. And in that thought, she found an unshakable confidence. Her fingers moved with precision over the controls, inputting sequences, adjusting energy levels, calculating trajectories, each motion deliberate and sure. Despite the shaking of the ship and the screams of crew members reacting to impacts around her, and as she prepared the cannon for firing, the laughter of the alien officers grew louder, almost desperate now, as if mocking her could somehow change the reality of the situation. But Mira only smiled faintly, because she understood something they did not. Humanity thrived in impossible situations, in danger and pressure, in the moments when others would falter, and that understanding filled her with quiet strength. She watched as the cannon's energy built up, a glowing pulse that seemed to stretch and expand with potential. and she felt a sense of awe at the power she was about to unleash. Realizing that this was the culmination of human ingenuity and determination, a symbol of what they could achieve when faced with extinction. As the first plasma volley from the Zorvax exploded against the shields, shaking the bridge violently, Mira's hand hovered over the final firing command, and for a brief moment, time seemed to slow, the alarms, the shaking, the fear all fading into the background as she focused entirely on the cannon, the ship, and the lives depending on her. The alien laughter faltered, a flicker of uncertainty passing across their monstrous faces as they finally recognized the resolve in the young human before them. But it was too late for doubt to change the outcome. Mira pressed the final sequence, and the hum of the cannon intensified, energy coiling like a living thing, ready to strike. She felt the vibration through her body, a mix of fear and exhilaration. And a deep sense of purpose settled in her chest, knowing that she was about to challenge fate itself, that she was no longer just a cadet but a force capable of rewriting the course of the battle. The cannon's glow expanded, bright enough to cast shadows across the bridge, illuminating the awe and tension on the faces of the crew, and Mira took one last steadying breath, knowing that this moment would define not just her, but the spirit of humanity in the eyes of the universe. And in that instant, surrounded by chaos, fire, and mocking aliens, she smiled faintly, because the impossible was about to happen. Because humanity was about to show that courage, intellect, and determination could overcome even the deadliest of enemies. And because a single human cadet was about to turn the tide of the battle in ways no one, not even the aliens, could have imagined. The moment the cannon fired, a brilliant beam of energy tore through the dark void of space, slicing the first wave of Zorvax ships like a blade through silk, and Mira Kane felt a surge of triumph as the glow reflected off the bridge walls, lighting up the stunned faces of the crew, but she knew the battle had only just begun. The destruction of the initial enemy ships brought no relief, only the awareness that the fleet was vast, relentless, and adapting quickly to the humans' unexpected power, and soon the Zorvax regrouped, sending swarms of smaller fighter craft, darting through space, weaving around the debris of their destroyed comrades, and firing plasma bursts that forced the Aegis into a deadly dance of dodging and counterattacking. Mira's hands flew over the control panels as she coordinated with the gunners, engineers, and navigation officers, issuing clear, precise commands despite the alarms and explosions shaking the ship, her mind working faster than she had ever imagined it could, calculating angles, energy output, shield distribution, and firing sequences simultaneously, because one misstep could spell death for everyone aboard. Outside the ship, the battlefield was chaos incarnate. Asteroids floating like drifting obstacles, smaller ships being shredded in seconds, plasma trails streaking across darkness, explosions illuminating the stars as if the night sky itself were burning, and through it all, the Aegis moved with unexpected grace, guided by the determination and ingenuity of humans who refused to surrender. Crew members who had been terrified mere minutes before now operated with an almost instinctual precision, trusting each other, trusting Mira, and trusting the strange, untested cannon that had become their beacon of hope, and their fear began to transform into adrenaline, courage, and fierce resolve, a testament to the human spirit that had endured countless threats and always found a way to rise. Mira noticed the alien officers adjusting their tactics, sending reinforcements to flank the ship, but she was already thinking several steps ahead, predicting their moves, creating countermeasures, and using the cannon in arcs that created shockwaves, tearing apart formations and scattering enemy fighters before they could strike again, each move a careful balance of risk and strategy, showing that humanity's greatest strength was not brute force, but intelligence, creativity, and adaptability. She saw flashes of smaller human vessels acting like decoys, drawing enemy fire while the cannon targeted larger ships, and the combined effort created moments of breathtaking tension and exhilaration as beams of energy collided with shields. Explosions rocked the void, and debris spun in eerie slow motion, leaving the impression of a deadly, magnificent ballet of war. Mira's heart pounded, yet she never lost focus, feeling the rhythm of the battle like a pulse that guided her decisions. Every strike of the cannon calculated, every adjustment deliberate, every command meant to save lives and turn the tide. She caught glimpses of crew members struggling to repair damaged sections of the ship, welding sparks flying as they crawled along twisted corridors, and she felt pride in their courage, knowing that each small act of bravery contributed to the larger fight, that every human aboard was part of a story far greater than themselves. The Zorvacs continued to adapt, their ships moving in unpredictable formations, their attacks more aggressive, more precise, and yet each maneuver was met with human ingenuity. The cannon's energy redirected to intercept multiple threats, shields overloaded just enough to deflect devastating plasma streams, and the Aegis weaving through space like a dancer in a deadly performance, guided by instinct, courage, and calculation. Mira's thoughts briefly flicked to her training, to all the drills, simulations, and lessons she had endured, and she realized that none of it truly prepared her for the fear, adrenaline, and exhilaration of real combat. But it had given her the tools to survive, and she now fused that knowledge with raw determination, with the desire to protect her crew, her ship, and humanity itself. The battle raged on for what felt like hours, though only minutes had passed, and Mira noticed the fatigue beginning to creep into the faces of her fellow humans, sweat streaking their faces, hands trembling on controls, yet none of them faltered. Their fear transformed into resolve, into action, and into a shared belief that they could not, and would not, lose. Amid the chaos, a massive Zorvax flagship emerged from the shadows, a dark, looming vessel bristling with weaponry, its shields glowing violet, an imposing reminder of the stakes at hand, and Mira's chest tightened at the sight, knowing that this ship was the heart of the enemy fleet, the one that commanded strategy and coordinated attacks, and that as long as it lived, humanity's chances were slim. She adjusted the cannon, calculating trajectories and energy levels for a full assault, realizing that this was not just a fight for survival, but a test of human ingenuity and courage against an enemy that had assumed superiority and opportunity to prove that even those they underestimated could change the course of the war. The alien officers aboard the flagship barked orders, their confidence seemingly unshakable, yet Mira noticed subtle signs of hesitation, a flicker of doubt in their movements, and she understood that the humans' unexpected resilience and skill were starting to unnerve them, that the cannon and the coordination of the crew were breaking the carefully constructed illusion of invincibility the Zorvacs had maintained for centuries. Mira continued to push the cannon to its limits, firing bursts and calculated arcs, using debris and asteroids to her advantage, forcing enemy ships into positions where they could be neutralized efficiently, and with every strike, the human crew gained confidence, their actions becoming more precise, their movements synchronized, and the battlefield slowly, imperceptibly, began to shift in favor of the Aegis. She saw moments of desperation and brilliance among the crew. A young engineer rerouting power just in time to save a critical section of the hull. A gunner taking a near-impossible shot that destroyed a pursuing fighter, and every human act of courage became part of a larger pattern, a demonstration of resilience, intelligence, and unity that was the true strength of humanity. The chaos outside the ship was relentless. Plasma fire cutting across the void, ships spinning out of control, explosions blossoming like deadly flowers in the darkness, yet the humans pressed on, each maneuver deliberate, each decision weighted. with life or death consequences, and Mira's mind never wavered, never paused, guiding her crew with a calm intensity that belied her young age, showing that experience was not only measured in years but in courage, focus, and the ability to act when all hope seemed lost. As the flagship loomed closer, the cannon's energy core thrumming with potential, Mira's thoughts sharpened, recognizing that the upcoming engagement with this massive vessel would require every ounce of skill, strategy, and nerve she and the crew possessed, that failure was not an option, and that humanity's future depended on her ability to challenge fate itself. In those moments, Mira understood that the battle was as much about psychology as firepower, showing the aliens that humans were unpredictable, relentless, and resourceful could unsettle them more than any weapon alone, and she embraced this truth, using every tool, tactic, and burst of energy to create chaos in the enemy ranks, forcing them to react to the humans rather than the other way around. Time seemed to stretch and compress, minutes passing like hours as Mira fired, dodged, commanded, and coordinated, and though her body was exhausted, her mind burned with clarity and purpose, and she realized that humans had survived countless threats throughout history because they refused to accept limits imposed by others. And now, in the cold void of space, that same spirit was rewriting the rules of engagement. The bridge shook again as another wave of enemy fighters closed in, but the cannon's arcs, the precise maneuvers of the Aegis, and the courage of every human aboard created a rhythm, a pattern of destruction and survival that gave them the edge slowly, surely, turning the tide of the battle and setting the stage for the decisive confrontation with the Zorvak's flagship, the moment when humanity would either rise or fall. The Zorvak's flagship loomed larger than anything Mira Kane had ever seen. A monstrous vessel of dark metal bristling with weapons and glowing violet energy shields that pulsed like a heartbeat. And as it hovered before the Aegis, the sense of danger was almost suffocating, yet Mira felt no fear, only a focused determination that sharpened every thought and movement. Knowing that this ship represented the command center of the enemy fleet, the heart of the assault, and the one target whose destruction could turn the entire battle in humanity's favor. Around her, the Aegis groaned and shuddered under the repeated volleys of plasma fire from the flagship and its surrounding escorts. Alarms screaming across the bridge and crew members working frantically to repair damage, reroute power, and keep the ship stable, but every action was coordinated. Every command from Mira clear and precise, a testament to the trust and skill of the human crew as they faced overwhelming odds together. Mira's hands danced over the control panels, adjusting the cannon's trajectory, energy output, and timing with a precision that came from instinct, intelligence, and a fierce will to survive. And as she did, she could feel the hum of the cannon growing, energy coiling and vibrating with potential, ready to unleash destruction the likes of which the Zorvaks had never witnessed. The flagship responded immediately, firing a torrent of plasma bolts and missiles that threatened to tear the Aegis apart. And Mira had to anticipate each strike, adjusting shields, firing defensive beams, and maneuvering the ship through a deadly gauntlet of explosions and debris, knowing that one mistake could mean the end for everyone aboard, yet refusing to let fear control her actions. The bridge was a hive of controlled chaos. Engineers crawled along damaged sections, welding and patching, while gunners fired in rapid succession, and navigation officers calculated evasive maneuvers that threaded the ship between enemy fire and floating wreckage. And through it all, Mira remained the calm center, her eyes locked on the cannon's readouts, her mind running simulations and calculations faster than anyone could comprehend. Because the fate of humanity rested in this moment and in her hands. She thought of all those who had doubted her, who had called her just a cadet and a small, Defiant smile crossed her face, because the reality of human ingenuity and courage was about to prove them wrong in the most spectacular way imaginable, and she felt the weight of responsibility settle like fire in her chest, driving her to push harder, focus sharper, and act decisively. Outside the ship, the battlefield was a violent storm of light and destruction. Fragments of alien ships drifted lazily through space. Plasma streaks cut across darkness like jagged lightning. Explosions bloomed and faded in seconds, and the stars themselves seemed to blink in the chaos. But through it all, the Aegis moved with deliberate grace. Guided by instinct, strategy, and the indomitable human spirit that Mira now embodied, she calculated the flagship's weak points with perfect clarity, targeting energy conduits and structural junctions that no one had dared approach before, and began the sequence for a full-charge shot from the cannon, energy building until it seemed to hum in harmony with the tension of the entire bridge, a living pulse of potential that could either save them all or destroy them in failure. The Zorvax officers on their flagship barked frantic orders, their confidence faltering as they realized that the humans were no longer reacting, but dictating the battle, turning chaos into opportunity, using the cannon and the Aegis's movements to dismantle formations and isolate the flagship, and in that moment, the arrogance that had defined them for centuries began to crumble in the face of human unpredictability. Mira coordinated with every member of her crew, issuing commands that moved the Aegis into the perfect firing position, timing every adjustment of shields, every redirection of energy, every evasive maneuver so that the cannon shot would strike true, and she felt a surge of pride in the humans around her, who, despite exhaustion, fear, and damage, executed each action with flawless precision, demonstrating that courage and unity were more powerful than any weapon. As the cannon reached full charge, glowing with an intensity that painted the bridge in white and gold light, Mira took a steadying breath and thought of humanity's history. The wars fought, the odds overcome, the determination that had allowed them to survive countless threats. And she knew that this moment was another testament to the resilience and ingenuity that defined them. That she was not merely a cadet, but a symbol of human potential at its peak. With a deep exhale, she pressed the firing command, and the cannon unleashed a blinding beam of energy, cutting through the void like a blade of pure light, striking the Zorvax flagship with such force that the shield screamed and shattered, explosions ripping across the hull as metal twisted, structures buckled, and the great vessel shuddered violently, breaking apart in a cascade of fire and debris that spun through space. The remaining enemy ships, leaderless and disoriented, faltered, their formations collapsing as the humans seized the opportunity, firing volleys with deadly accuracy, moving with coordination born of desperation and determination. And each successful strike further cemented the tide turning irrevocably in favor of humanity. On the bridge, Mira's hands were still trembling, her face streaked with sweat and grime, yet her eyes shone with triumph. And around her, the crew erupted into cheers, relief and exhilaration mingling as they realized the impossible had been achieved. The battlefield, once filled with fear and chaos, now reflected the aftermath of human perseverance, scattered wreckage of enemy ships, glowing fragments of destroyed plasma bolts, and the Aegis floating battered but unbroken, a testament to human strength and ingenuity. Mira allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, to look at the faces of her crew and feel the weight of what they had accomplished together, knowing that the victory was not hers alone, but shared by every human who had refused to surrender, who had fought, adapted, and believed when all seemed lost. Commander Vroth approached, the usual arrogance gone, replaced by a reluctant respect, and in his gaze Mira saw the acknowledgement of something the Zorvax had always underestimated: humanity's capacity to rise, to overcome, and to change fate itself. The stars beyond the shattered battlefield twinkled, indifferent to war. Yet Mira felt them as witnesses to the triumph of her species, as symbols of the endless possibilities humanity could achieve. And she realized that this battle was not merely a victory, but a statement, a proof that courage, intelligence, and unity could surpass even the deadliest threats. As the bridge quieted, the Aegis floating among the wreckage of the defeated fleet, Mira Kane, no longer just a cadet but a hero in the eyes of her crew, felt a profound sense of accomplishment, a deep and unshakable knowledge that humans could achieve the impossible when driven by determination and will, and that a single act of bravery and intelligence could indeed rewrite the course of fate, leaving a mark not just on the battlefield, but on the very story of humanity's survival in the vast, dangerous universe.